Tuesday, and welcome back to another episode of the Homecomings podcast. I'm your host, Evelina Olahovska, multi passionate creative soul, brand strategist, designer, and founder of my dear design studio, Studio Donka. And speaking of multi passionate creative soul, that is the topic of today's lovely episode. We're talking all things multi passionateness, and this is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart, especially considering the fact that I have been on my own multi passionate awareness journey in the last, I would say, 5 years or so, coming to really know this part and piece of me deeper, this multi passionate part of me. And as I was really dreaming into this season of the podcast and thinking about how I'm introing and talking about myself, who am I, right? I mean, this whole journey, especially in this particular season, season 3 to date, has been about coming to know yourself, right? It's asking ourselves the questions to understand, who am I really? And it's really a simple but like difficult question of someone asking you, like, what do you do? Who are you? What do you lead with? Do you say, oh, I'm the designer, or I'm the strategist, or I'm the sister, mother, brother, father, whoever? Am I the traveler? Am I the ever curious soul junkie, foodie, health, wellness, entrepreneur, business? I mean, so many things, right? This idea of parts, pieces, labels, this is or will be the talking points of today. And it's, like I mentioned, something I'm very passionate about because I consider myself someone who has grown up wanting all the things, wanting to learn all the things, wanting to be all the things. And for so much of my life, I mean, quite literally up until 5 years ago, I didn't know I could be all the things. And I've had a few very pivotal moments in my life and people that have come into my life that literally, not that I needed it, but I think I did in a way, gave me the permission to embrace these different parts and pieces of me. And if you've tuned into the episodes in this show at all to date in the first 2 seasons, there have been moments, because this is such a topic near and dear to me, I have spoke on this and probably mentioned and plugged some of those people's. My dear client, Susanna Goss, who I remember when I actually, the first year of my business, when I had started, I remember having this conversation with her around, I'm all these things. I don't know what I should choose to be because, I was an architect. I left architecture. I was doing graphic design. Now I'm starting my own business. It's like there's these things that are seemingly related, but also so different. So which ones do I choose? And I remember her saying on that phone call with me that first time, like, just get rid of the pressure of the label. Get rid of trying to fit in a box, in a nice tidy box of like being one thing or doing one thing. And I was like, holy shit, like you're so right. And she gave me so many beautiful resources and recommendations of people who lead their lives embracing this multi-passionateness. And I know multi-passionate has become almost like a buzzword in the last couple of years. Like I feel like a lot of people now consider themselves multi-passionate, but I'm not mad about it. If anything, I love seeing it because in essence, and I would actually argue strongly, we're all multi-passionate. And a lot of people, unfortunately, and I consider myself definitely one of those people, didn't or don't still see that they can be all those things. So this episode is especially potent and may land if you are someone tuning in who has never considered this question for themselves. Maybe you have lived your life feeling like, again, this pressure of like, I need to just do one thing, but all the while you feel this disconnection and like deep, I don't know, uncomfort of like, oh, this like, it's like a feeling of like a push and pull. That's the best way I could describe it. Of like, okay, I get it, right? Like everyone in my life has been working the same job all their lives. And like my parents have had the same job for 40 years. And, you know, maybe society tells you like you only need to do this one thing or consider yourself this one thing. And so you feel like, okay, I see everyone else doing it, but why does it feel good for me? And all the while, like I'm trying this thing and I'm about this thing and I love doing this and that and that. And so there's this deep disconnection and divide internally between you. Again, this word permission, huge. If you are someone tuning in, navigating these feelings, this episode might be triggering in the best ways ever. Or if you're someone tuning in who maybe is aware or knows that they are the multi-passionate, they have maybe embraced like, okay, you know what? I am all these things. I love all these things, but you don't know how they all fit together. Maybe you have seemingly or objectively very different competing interests or things that you do say, and this is especially, I want to preface too, if you are tuning in as a business owner or creative entrepreneur, solopreneur, and have your brand, whatever it is that you may be, and you are feeling this deeper disconnectivity, or again, that similar feeling of like that discomfort of like, okay, I am this thing, but I also feel like there's all these other parts of me that are like existing here. And maybe I want to integrate them, but I feel like I can't because it doesn't make sense. But I see other people doing it and like, how do they do it? This episode may also be deeply helpful for you, friends, because I'm going to be talking specifically on how we can do that, how I've personally done that, and how I work with clients to help them do that. And just to offer a little bit of relief before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, it is absolutely possible and it's actually easier than you think it is. There is a trick to doing it, and I will be sharing some deets on this episode. So, to start and to give a little bit of context, before we dive into talking about the more tactical ways of embracing the multi passionateness, my own personal story. I have grown up, I can look back at the context of my life and see it for what it is now, and of course, in hindsight, and observe all these different moments in my life. Moments where I have worked different jobs, moments that I have had different interests, different hobbies, interactions with friends and family. And I could see, again, bird's eye view of the different multifaceted avenues of Evelina. And I can openly speak about some of those things now on the show of me being an architect, me being the brand strategist and designer, the now entrepreneur, the podcaster. There's the artist side of Evelina. There is the health, wellness, fitness junkie side of Evelina. There's the traveling side of Evelina. There's the deep personal development, self help, also junkie side of Evelina. These plus so much more. Oh, probably the biggest that I forgot to mention, the immigrant side of Evelina. The bit of her who was born in Poland, immigrated when she was mini Evelina at 2 years old, and has come to know herself through this lens of being a Polish immigrant, but growing up in America, et cetera, and integrating into that, integrating that part of her into her brand since then, which I will be getting into shortly. But yes, just like very clearly seeing these elements of me, and all the while, however, not feeling as though I can be all those things. Like it's kind of interesting, right? And maybe you could do this for yourselves now too, if you're someone tuning in and listening, just like, just settle into your space. You could close your eyes, take a deep breath, and try to see your life, the timeline of your life, if you want to think about it from that sense, and consider the different seasons that you've navigated, the different jobs you've had, the different, titles, labels, bits of you that you have worn or associated as, and how those feel for you. Is it a lot of stuff? More often than not, we, like I mentioned, because we're all truly multi passionate, I'm sure all of us have been through such a wide range and breadth of different life experiences. Some people naturally have so many more than others, others may have a few, but regardless, we all have different many ones. And so, up until again, quite recently, within the last 5 years, I did not know and I did not live my life from a place of feeling like I could embrace all those things. And if you're listening, you're like, well, what do you mean? How? You're like, I don't get it. Like, you are all those things. There's a difference between knowing that you are all those things and embracing all of those things. And for me, I knew that, okay, yeah, I'm an immigrant and like I was an architect and I do design and I have all these competing things, right? But I didn't give myself full permission to lead with those parts. There was a profound light bulb moment that I had last year when I was taking myself through my own personal rebrand process, where I quite literally answered the questions that I give my clients to answer when we kick off a brand strategy and discovery process, because I work so intimately with my clients and because we dive so deep in understanding who they are as a person, because we need to know that context to then be able to craft a personal brand and logo and word mark and colors and all that for them that reflects who they are. They have to go through a deep inquiry and journey, which is essentially what we're doing in the season of the podcast. And so I had never taken myself through that own personal process. I have had a personal brand, for many years now, but I never dove that deep. And so it wasn't up until I was going and taking myself through the process. And I remember coming to a question around, who are you? And again, seemingly simple, but quite nuanced and deep question of really identifying who you are. And I took a moment and I started listing all these different things about myself, the titles that I've worn, the labels that I've worn, how people see me as. And it was this long, extensive list of all the things that I had just listed: the immigrant, the architect, the foodie, traveler, health, wellness, fitness junkie. And it was a moment of so much deep clarity for myself. And also, it might sound a little like cheesy and corny, but like a moment of like empowerment where I was like, dang, like I am this whole list of things. Like, what? Like, seeing that list and seeing how truly multifaceted I am made me feel so freaking good. And so, a reflective journal prompting moment now, friends. Pause this episode. If you don't already have your journals, run, go grab them, and sit with the question of who are you really? And we've been essentially chunking down and peeling back the layers of this question in last week's episode. There were many tactical journal prompts around identifying some of these things. What are your values? What are your strengths? What are your unique stories? Here, let's make a list and take inventory of the titles and the labels that you've worn and how they feel. And sit with whether or not these are titles and labels that feel good to you, whether or not they're titles or labels that have a heaviness. I think the word label is comes with so much connotation and context, in more so a negative light for most people because it feels so constricting. There are common associations that people, connect with when they hear the word label, or when you just choose a label, whether it is something like architect or immigrant. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to society, right? And so I think it can be so limiting when we start to think about ourselves through this lens. But what is empowering is, instead of thinking about it as these limiting things where, like, oh, we're just this thing, it's no, this is a part and piece of us, actually, that is just a little bit of the grander version of who you are. And so it's honestly this idea of kind of flipping the narrative of limitations, or the limitations that we put on ourselves, the labels that we wear, and feeling like we're only this thing, and actually seeing them in this like lighter, more beautiful light of, no, this is just a little segment of the grander scheme of me as an individual that I get to either choose to integrate and lead with in my brand or my life, or I get to put on the side. Now, the trick that comes with this prompt and this question is the discernment and getting clear on why the energy behind the label feels the way it does. So, for example, for me, the label of being an immigrant, I had recognized that that was a part of me that I more or less kind of neglected. Like, I've always known, sure, I immigrated from this country years ago, but I was like, whatever, like, sure, I'm just an immigrant. I think because I grew up in my hometown of New Britain here in Connecticut, where like everyone is Polish, so it felt very normal. And it wasn't up until I left for college many years later, when I was 18, and I was in a context where there honestly weren't any Polish people. It was just, I met more American friends for the first time in my life, and they were shocked to discover this part of me that, like, wait, you weren't born here? Like, you speak a foreign language? Like, what? And so that was the first time in my life where I kind of felt a little different, not in a bad way, but in an interesting way, where I kind of started questioning the side of me of like, oh, I guess this isn't kind of common. And I want to be mindful here in sharing this. In When I connected with this immigrant side of me in my journal prompting exercise last year, it wasn't that I was bringing light to this part of me that made me feeling special in a way. This isn't about like, oh my gosh, like now I'm like so cool, or like this egoic kind of, yeah, like this special energy of like, look at me, I'm an immigrant kind of a thing, but more so just bringing it to the light and taking ownership and acknowledging it and actually kind of celebrating it in a way, and recognizing like, holy shit, there is this part of me that I more or less kind of neglected all my life that has literally made me who I am, that has shaped me into the human that I am, that I haven't, I mean, quite literally, I've taken for granted all my life. And it was really this moment of bringing it to the surface, writing it out on paper, and like giving it the attention and the love, honestly, that it deserves. Because the immigrant side of me, oh my gosh, like so much of the person that I am is because of the way that my parents raised me, the home that I grew up in, the culture and the context of my family, my friends, my heritage, like all of that stuff. And and it's worth celebrating. It's who I am. And again, it's not to kind of show off or flaunt or anything like that, but it's like, dang, like this is such a personal and beautiful side of me that I get to embrace a little bit deeper. And whether or not I choose to weave it into my brand, which ultimately I did because I felt like I want to, like this is literally a part of me that I want to lead with. Or if I just choose to acknowledge it and just kind of keep it personal to myself, the fact that I wrote it out and I saw it on this paper amidst all these other things of me, the traveler, the foodie, the designer, the creative, it just felt like this moment of empowerment that was powerful, literally. Like that's just all I could say. And for someone like myself, and for someone who's listening, and tell me if this relates, friends, that is always hard on themselves, that always feels like I have to prove myself and work extra hard to really ultimately just prove to myself that I'm good enough, to have this moment personally for me where I am just validating my own life experiences and taking ownership of all that I am was so, again, it may sound cheesy, but like magical and like special for me. And so I really encourage everyone listening, again, if you have your journals and you're sitting with this question, like really anchor into this question and sit with and make a list of all of these pieces of you and take inventory of how they feel. And if there's resistance, and if there's some ickiness around any title or label or anything, sit with the question of why. Is this because you have neglected this part and piece of you all your life? Or is it because there's just a fear around you owning it because of a, I don't know, concern of what someone else might think of you or a fear of judgment? And really kind of get real with yourself, really get honest and ask, like, is this valid? Like, do I continue living in fear? Or do I just choose to acknowledge that I have this fear and kind of just put it to the side? Like, okay, fear, like, I see you. I see what you're trying to do here, but I'm not going to let you run the show anymore. And I'm going to choose to own this part of me. And again, whether you choose to weave it into your brand or just like keep it on your heart, that is just a decision for you, friends, to make on your own. But the inventory, the clarity that comes from this prompt and this exercise could be so, so, so powerful. When I had taken myself through this exercise, I realized, holy shit, I'm all these things. This is amazing. And for the first time in my life, claiming all of that, acknowledging, yes, I get to be all of these things, and choosing to lead with those things in my brand was so powerful. And so now moving into the topic of business ownership, entrepreneurship. If you're someone who has a business or a personal brand that feels like, okay, I recognize that I'm all these things, but how do they all fit together? How do they all make sense? Because up until I had taken myself through this inquiry last year, I was Evelina, the designer. I was doing branding, design, graphic design. I was freelancing, and that was kind of only what I was associating myself as. Like when people would ask me, like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a designer. And it's always a question, right? Like, how do you answer that? And when I intro the episodes, as you've heard for this season, I'm leading with multi-passionate creative soul because that at my core and essence is it. I am multi-passionate creative soul. I have so many passions. I am at the core creative, and that's it, that's how I choose to kind of, that's the umbrella term, right? But it wasn't up until I took myself through my process last year that I allowed myself to own all these different elements of me, because up until then it was just one thing. Because truthfully, the hang up for me was I didn't know how all these other parts and pieces fit. It was like, what does me being an immigrant have anything remotely even close to doing with me being a designer, right? Like those two things objectively are actually quite different. And so, for someone who is, let's say, social media marketer or nutrition coach or financial advisor, whatever that is, that has these other parts of them, maybe their side hobbies or passions that truly, like, objectively don't really add up. Like, say you're a financial advisor, but you also have a gardening hobby and you're also a mom. You're like, how in the world does motherhood, gardening, and finances, what in the heck do those things have to do with each other, right? And I want to caveat before I go into this of the discernment that also is needed of deciding, do you actually want to integrate all these parts and pieces of you? And this takes, again, another level of knowing yourself. Are you someone who is at divides of these competing parts and pieces of you? Or for your personal brand and business, do you actively just want to choose being this one thing? Like, When I'm showing up in my business, I am just the financial advisor. I don't want to talk about motherhood. I don't want to talk about my gardening hobbies or whatever else. That's totally fine. That comes with this level of, again, discernment and knowing yourself and identifying, like, I just want to be this thing. However, I do want to say, if we are in the business of personal branding and having and fostering connections with other humans, the more human that we could allow ourselves to be, the more that will open us up to facilitating and garnering more connections with other humans. And more often than not, we as humans want to see more parts of humans. So it would serve, I think, and again, this all comes down to who you are, because if you are naturally a reserved person, someone that wants to keep different elements of your life near and dear to you, absolutely, again, know thyself. But there is a lovely edge that comes when we allow ourselves to take ownership more of these parts and pieces of us. And again, not to say that we have to put equal weight on all the labels of ourselves. We get to choose which ones we lead with first. For example, when I show up when in my brand, in my business, I'm leading with my immigrant story, but then I'm leading with the design aspects of me. There's the travel part of Evelina, there's the health, fitness, wellness junkie part of Evelina that I'm just kind of sprinkling in mindfully here and there. But I'm leading with the design part because I'm in the business of doing design. But I also know that by me sharing my immigrant story, by me maybe sharing a recipe here and there on my Instagram stories, on my social media, that allows for people who might also be multi-passionate, who are looking for branding services, that may also be health and wellness junkies, that may also be immigrants, to connect with me. Again, these are these little portals that we are opening up the moment we decide and we claim, okay, I'm going to embrace who I am, the various colors of all that I am, and speak to them. And whatever weight I put on them is the weight I get to decide. But I'm going to own all of them because they just naturally feel so good for me. Now, back to the question of how does this all fit in? How does this all make sense? How did I make sense and have my immigrant story and my design work blend together? This is where a deep dive is required, but a fun deep dive. I don't want to intimidate people. This could take a little bit of, of course, deeper soul searching, but it's a fun exercise of trying to identify the common thread that ties all of these avenues together. Because, but going back to that example of you being the financial advisor and the gardener and the mom, while objectively all those things may on paper look very different, there could be, and more often than not, there is a common thread that we can identify and pull out and extract that is the driver behind what you do. So, a question I want everyone to sit with is, what lights you up in every single thing that you're doing, whether it's your business, whether it is gardening, whether it is motherhood? Like, what is it about you personally? Like, what's your purpose? Really, it's the purpose question that we're after on here. Like, what is the core driver and the why behind why you are choosing to do everything that you're doing? And this is where the beauty and the magic really starts to unfold, friends, when we're able to get clear on that thing, because we can apply that reasoning, that logic, that rationale as the connector behind everything that we do. So for me, what unearthed this really for me was my home story, my immigrant story. I realized that there was so much magic that I connected with when I got clear on my immigrant story, because all that I am, a lot of what I am, is shaped on my upbringing. And the common thread behind all of it is this idea of home. I speak very openly on this topic of home. It's really become a metaphor for everything that I do, because there's deeper intentionality behind the notion of home. Everything that I do, whether it is branding, whether it is health and wellness, whether it is this podcasting avenue, everything that I do is driven by the desire to come back home to myself. And you're probably listening, you're like, okay, that sounds so fluffy or arbitrary, or like, how does that make sense? But I've been able to identify this theme for myself where literally, whether I am designing a project or I'm going to the gym or I am traveling, I need to be absolutely lit up by what it is, because I am naturally such a passionate person. I'm a fiery person. Like, if I'm not absolutely obsessed with what I'm doing, I'm not going to do it. Like, you will be hard pressed to force me into doing something. And so there is this deep driver and like motivating factor for me when it comes to all that I do that's related to me feeling good, because I know when I feel good, I can show up for other people and inspire them and leave them feeling good. And so I was able to craft this metaphor of home for me And home is inspired by my architecture background. My thesis in architecture school was all about the memory of home. That's when I really started to look at my immigrant upbringing. Studio domka, the word domka literally means home in Polish, and that was a word that I used to say. That was one of my first words that I actually learned to speak when I was a baby. So that was like, okay, clear, like beautiful little um clue, light bulb moment for me, right? Like of that word. And so I was seeing these themes of like, okay, my thesis was on home. My first word was home. I love home. I love designing. Like I always wanted to be an interior designer. Like I actually originally always wanted to go for interior design instead of architecture because I always wanted to have my own HGTV show. So I've been obsessed with the home, this whole idea. And so I was able to kind of translate the notion of home into coming back home to myself, which ultimately just means doing things that are in alignment for me. And so, regardless, whatever it is that I do, however I show up, I am able to justify all of my decisions, all of my seemingly objective, separate, disconnected elements of me as no, these are just elements of me. And every time I do them, I'm coming back home to myself. To offer another example that might be helpful for you as you start to think about finding this theme for yourself, the financial advisor example. You are a financial advisor, you're a mother, and you are a gardener. What is it about all of these things that you are doing that is really the core driver behind it? Or maybe is there a label or a title that you've worn that has a deeper intentionality that you could then apply to all these other facets and avenues of you? What if there was a profound life-changing experience that you navigated once you became a mom, right? And that experience changed you so deeply, and now you've noticed and observed yourself bringing this beautiful, nurturing, caring quality into your motherhood journey. Could that same nurture and care be applied into the work that you do as a financial advisor, into your gardening hobby, into, I don't know, say you're an avid runner as well? You do all of these things and you lead with this idea of the nurture, the care at the core. Can you leverage and use that as a theme, as the connecting thread behind everything? Because especially if you're someone who really is in the place of like wanting to craft a personal brand that is so multifaceted and has these different buckets of like, here, go on my website. If you want to read the blog about finances. If you want to get running inspiration, here's this for running inspiration. If you want to, you know, read my recipes because you also love cooking on the side, like here you go. There's a place for it all, friends, like truly. And I think this is where there's so much disconnect and divide between people feeling like, well, I can't share my recipes if I love cooking because I only talk about finances. Absolutely. There's a clear delineation behind these seemingly different things. But if you're someone who wants to strictly lead with, again, just the business part, then lead with the finances. But if you really are feeling called to want to share more of these things, I think this talking point right now is specifically being dictated for those that struggle and may need that permission of like, oh, I want to do these things, but like I don't know where they fit. They absolutely could find a place. I think there's some little strategic things, of course, when it comes to establishing a website presence, or maybe do I have separate social media accounts? Sure, maybe, but I really just want to leave everyone with the permission that it could be done because I think a lot of people feel like they can't, like they have to just like neglect these different elements of themselves, but you absolutely don't have to. And I think a really beautiful and simple way to do that, and this is the way that I love to actually encourage my clients and I lead my clients to doing this. I am the person that like brings it all together for them, is identifying that connector, whether that's a story, whether that's an intention, that core purpose, that driver that connects all these, again, seemingly different parts of you together. That's what we're after here. And I find every single time we're able to do this in my process with clients, once they find that connecting thread, that's it. Then it's like this liberation, this like empowerment, this levity that they feel of like, okay, it all makes sense now. Like I get it. Like I get how all these things fit together because while they're seemingly different, they're actually not because they're connected at a core level by this core driver. For me, that's the home. For someone else, that could be a motherhood experience about care and nurturing. For someone else, it could be, I don't know, a story about freedom. If you are someone who's doing, I don't know, like you're a developer or a designer or a coder, and you've also shared this beautiful experience of traveling the world, and you have this beautiful open perspective around exploration and adventure. What if that is the theme that ties all of your passions and pursuits and labels together, right? It's getting clear on what that thing is for you, but it has to be a thing that like really lights you up. Because for me, home, that's not going anywhere. Like I've been preaching about the home and this metaphor for the last, 5+ years with my brand. I'm going to continue preaching. That may evolve, but like it feels so anchored, so rooted because it is so naturally a part of who I am. The first word I learned to speak was home. I did my thesis on home. My home was in Poland. Like those parts of me are never going to leave me. Like they are an inherent part of who I am. And the more that we're able to anchor into literally who we are, we're not going to tire of our brands. We're not going to tire of how we show up in the world because that is just who we are. Like you can't get any more authentic and genuine than that, right? And that's what we're after here. This is where the questions, the second guessing, the self sabotage, the imposter syndrome completely fizzle away when we're able to anchor into the identification and the connection of this thing for us, the purpose, the driver, the core why. And this is just starting to foreshadow the next talking point that we're going to get into next week, all related to the conversation around purpose. Because this is where we're going to, again, be peeling back another layer after coming to know ourselves, which we've been doing in this series. How does it all tie together? How does it come together? And how do we establish that core why behind what we do? This week, I wanted to really just put a bow on the self inquiry. And if you've been along for the journey in these first 5 episodes of the season, thank you. And I hope you've garnered some realizations and insights from listening thus far, because this is really the intensity that we need, that, or at least that I lead with in my process when I work with clients, of helping them really truly come to know themselves. Because once that's done, then we're ready to establish the brand. Thank you guys for joining this week. If any of this information and content on this season is resonating with you, the next cohort of the Homecomings Workshop, my 12-week, very intimate personal branding group mentorship program, is kicking off September 3rd. And so if you are intrigued, if you're interested at all, I'm going to drop the wait list link in the show notes. So be sure to get on that list. I'm going to be dripping more information as the summer unfolds to give you guys more context on what to expect, because this information that I'm sharing in this season was really inspired off of my first incubator that I launched just a few months ago here. And I'm so fiery and passionate about this topic. And I really want to inspire and encourage more people, more humans out there who either have a business or are looking to start a business, to craft one that's in alignment for them and share a personal brand with them that really embodies all that they are. Because ultimately, that's what everyone at the end of the day, I at least believe, is after. Like showing up in their truth, in their light, and expressing themselves in that way. So 12 weeks, super intimate, beautiful journey experience. And if you're someone listening and any of this content aligns, I would love to have you. I'd love to connect. So information will be in the show notes. Thank you guys again for joining me. Stay tuned next week. We're diving into all things purpose, and it's going to get so good. I will see you guys back.
Hi again, it's me. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you were able to garner some takeaways and nuggets for your personal home journey. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world if you left a rating and review. And if you'd like to connect deeper, find me at Studio Dumka on Instagram, where I share content on all things home, of course. Sending a big, cozy, homey hug your way, friends. Till next time.